part of their is also in their eyes. Okay, so any movement that they try to initiate, the harder they try, the harder it is for them to do. So sometimes there'll be a sudden breakthrough in a word or an eye glance or a quick answer to something because of an excitement that allows things to travel quicker in the brain. And sometimes you're going to have to wait a while. And the sad thing is that when we go to test our girls, to prove competence instead of presuming competence, that the more pressure there is for them to complete this test to prove that they know things, the less well they're going to do. So if we start with believing that they can and will do these things, we're going to get a lot further rather than making all sorts of prerequisites for communication. And I'm not going to go over the facts that are on the slide, but one of the reasons that we look to Eyegaze for these girls is, first of all, they have great Eyegaze skills. And second of all, that the less movements required, the better we're going to get for results. Ask them to prove that they're learning by doing all of these complex physical movements, we're never going to find out what they're learning because it's just so unbalanced. Okay? So what are our goals in looking at Eyegaze communication? I think that one of the things that I've found is that everybody on the team sometimes has different goals. So to use Kelly as an example, when I arrived in her class, one member of the team told me, this is a medical device, we shouldn't even be exploring getting a communication device for school. And I've been doing AAC with kids for 15 years, so luckily I didn't believe that. And then hopefully that person's not watching. And then, yeah, too late now. And but other people on the team said that they thought that, okay, maybe it'd work. And then even the Shoners thought that, well, it'll be a choice-making device, right? So we'll put it up, Kelly can choose, does she want to watch TV, does she want to listen to music, does she want to read a book? And then we'll put it away. But then for speech and for myself, the idea was we're going to go to communication. This is about communicating. This is about more than wants and needs. It's about every part of communication. It's about connection. It's about control. It's about allowing somebody to be a full person. So we're looking for interactive communication. We're looking for the ability to not only make choices and indicate needs, but to connect with other people. We're looking to build those neural connections, right? So we all know that part of the problem is that there's just as many, everything's firing, but the connections aren't connecting. So the idea is we keep building them up and building them up and building them up until they connect. And one of the ways we can do that is by using communication, is by asking them to use language skills. We're also looking to improve quality of life, and I have to say that every kid, Eyegaze or not, Rett or not, every student I've ever worked with who's gotten to a point where they can communicate has had a dramatic improvement in their quality of life. Behaviors disappear, issues with anxiety and depression decrease, sometimes medical issues really decrease now that they're just happier people. We see a huge change in quality of life. And then to ensure human rights. And then I think all of us have our own goals. I've had parents tell me I just want them to be able to tell me, or her to be able to tell me, where does it hurt? I've had parents tell me, like, if she could just once say, I love you, that would mean everything to me. So we all have our own goals as we go into this. So when I said human rights, there is actually a communication bill of rights. And it says a website called Scope in England, but it was written by ASHA, which is the American Association of Speech and Hearing, the speech therapist group. Sorry, speech therapists, I apologize. So they wrote out this communication bill of rights. And it starts where we all start, the ability to request. And then a lot of times, sadly, that's where we stop. So we don't think about the ability to refuse, to say, no, I don't want to do that. The ability to express preferences and feelings. What do you like? What do you not like? I think a lot of times, especially as you work with somebody who's nonverbal for a long time, or you raise your daughter, we start to assume that this is what maybe they like or don't like because they don't have a way to tell us. And then when they get a device, they can say, like, for example, nobody knew that Kelly wants her music loud, like really, really loud. And now we know that. And she's been able to express that not only by telling us to turn it up, but she has the ability to crank up her music really loud on her Toby, and she does often, especially when there are visitors in the classroom. But so we've learned that about her. She now has the ability, and one of the human rights is to reject offered choices. I mean, a lot of times, how many times do we say, do you want to watch SpongeBob or Cars? And that's it. What if they don't want to watch TV? What if what they really want to watch is The Sorcerer's Apprentice, and it's not a choice today, and they know it's over there on the shelf? So the ability to reject the choices that are offered and ask for more. To request attention and interaction. One of the biggest things I see from students once they get high-tech communication is sort of what I call the come here, go away. And it's sort of this idea that they can get you to come over to them. Come here. All right, I'm here. What do you need? Go away. All right, I'll come back later. To receive intervention to improve communication skills is huge, and it's a human right. It's not just IDIA and what you're guaranteed through law. It's a human right that if you don't have the skills to communicate, you'll be given intervention to improve your skills. To receive a response, and this is a big one, to receive a response to any communication, whether or not we can fulfill the need. So another Kelly example, she's going to be a big example girl tonight, is she will sometimes, not often, but sometimes she will say, is SpongeBob on? And we're at school. She's not going to watch SpongeBob. So I have about 6 answers I give to that, and one of them is, probably, but you're not watching. But she has a right to get her question answered. Even if she's asked it 16 times, she has a right for me to be able to say, I heard you. I get that you want to talk about SpongeBob or watch SpongeBob, but not now. They have the right to have an access to the device. I don't know how many of you know girls or your own girl or know somebody who has a communication device and somebody takes it away from them. I've worked with a lot of students who, if they activate too frequently, their teacher, their speech therapist will find it annoying and take the device away or shut the volume off. I've known people who insist that communication devices can't be available while kids are eating because it might get food on them. And when do we talk to each other the most in life other than a meal? I mean, that's what we make plans to do. Let's go get coffee. Let's have dinner. And we're going to take away communication during that time. I always tell student teachers that I have that you have the right to take away the device at exactly the same time you would allow somebody to remove your vocal folds. Like if you're ready to hand them the scalpel and say, go ahead and take them out, then you can take away the device. Otherwise, you don't have that right. It needs to be in front of them. You have the right to make sure that your device is working correctly. As an AT specialist, I often get calls to come in and to do an eval for a communication device and say, well, what were they using in the past? Oh, well, they have a Dynabox, but it stopped working, so it's in the closet. Well, you don't really actually need me to evaluate. You have a device. Let's get it fixed. And they have the right to be spoken with respect and courtesy, to be spoken to directly and not have the person who's with them be the person who is talked to instead of them, and to have clear, meaningful, cultural and linguistically, and I would say, and also age-appropriate communications. So one of the things for my teenagers, and oftentimes parents don't like this very much, is that I like to have messages like, shut up and get out of my face. And, sometimes even further than that, if I can get the families to agree. And if they say it the wrong time in the wrong place, they're in trouble. If your son or daughter who doesn't have disabilities told you to shut up, they'd be in trouble. And if your individual who uses a communication device says, shut up, well, you know what? You're in trouble. Sorry, SpongeBob is no longer on. And that's sort of the idea of that's what basic dignity and human rights is all about. So the next thing I want to talk about is that Eyegaze is only an option. I think since Eyegaze has gotten really big in the past year and a half or 2 years, that people have gotten really excited and have decided, okay, we're going to go with Eyegaze. And I heard a great story from the Dynabox company representative the other day where he told me that he assessed a student for an Eyegaze device because the mom wanted an Eyegaze device, and the student didn't do very well. And it turned out that the student was very visually impaired. But because Eyegaze devices are hot right now, and because it's a lot faster than some other access methods, the mom really wanted the student to have it, and it wasn't an appropriate choice. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the other choices that are out there. Direct select is always better than some other means like a switch, or scanning or encoding things. So if there's any way somebody can point with their hand or their finger or a head stick, or either a baseball cap with a stick or a special head stick, a mouse stick, a toe or a foot, or eye pointing is going to be a possible choice. And by the way, all these pictures of girls are girls who have Rett, but you probably don't know because they don't live anywhere near here. But so another choice is scanning, and probably a lot of your girls have used switches. So scanning is when one selection at a time lights up, and the student has to hit the switch when they get to the one they want, or there's two switches, and they hit one switch to move the selection along and another switch to select. And sometimes, scanning is really a good method, and it's a lot less expensive than Eyegaze devices, about $10,000 less at this point. And it's something that is readily available in most severe special ed programs to work on, whereas we don't always have an Eyegaze device to try, or we almost never have an Eyegaze device to try. And then there's things like a mouse or a trackball or a touchpad or foot mouse or head tracking. And then this is just my caveat. A lot of people seem to mix up head tracking and eye tracking. So head tracking is tracking your whole head movement. So a lot of times you have to wear some sort of dot, like a shiny dot. Have any of you had your daughters use this? So you wear some sort of shiny dot somewhere, and then a camera follows that dot, and that's the mouse. Eyegaze tracking is tracking the pupils of the eyes. So an LED light is next to the camera and is shining on the eyes, although nobody can tell that's happening. And the reflection is then tracked. And that's a big difference if you think about, especially for girls with Rett, that the head movement, there's a lot of apraxia there. There's a lot of movements that are not controlled, whereas the eye movement tends to be, but not always, more controlled. So a lot of times if you say, I think, if you go to your team and you say, I'd really like to explore, eye tracking, and the team says, well, we have a device that follows our head. Not the same thing. And it gets mixed up all the time. In fact, I had a student, it wasn't somebody with Rett, but it was a student who, he was 17, a young man who the mom thought an Eyegaze device was ordered. And it arrived, and it was a head tracking device. And he couldn't head track. He could have eye tracked, but he couldn't head track. And so he had to actually, because once you have a device, it's pretty much 5 years before you can try again for a different device, he had to learn how to do scanning with the switch, because there was just no way for us to add Eyegaze tracking when he was from New Hampshire. So when New Hampshire Public Health Insurance had just said, we're going to give you a head tracker, they weren't about to turn around and give an eye tracker. A few more things about access methods. So I said before that direct selection is always better. And direct selection is when you choose a letter, word, or symbol by directly pointing to it, and that includes with your eyes. It's always the first choice. If there's a choice between direct selecting and scanning, you're going to always want to go with the direct selecting. It tends to be faster and more efficient, which is nice, so it doesn't take 45 minutes to get a sentence out. And it tends to have that lower cognitive load that we just talked about, because you don't have to worry about thinking about the scan or thinking about the code system. You're just going to look at or touch what you want. Indirect selection using scanning or encoding works really well if you have only need one controllable movement to activate. So if the eyes weren't a good avenue and you had a finger movement or a shoulder shrug or the ability to lean forward, then that might be a way to access communication. And it tends to be the best choice, right? So on here, this always means yes, right? Or better yet, if we go to right. If we go to slippers, sorry, now I can hold that fire. If we go to slippers, and the Toby, slippers always means slippers, right? Or elephant always means elephant. But in the PRC system, elephant sometimes means elephant. If you hit animals and then elephant, it means elephant. If you hit colors and then elephant, elephant now means gray. If you hit size and then elephant, elephant now means big. Okay, so it's a whole different language system. So if you're leaning towards that, and it's a very efficient and quick language system, if you're leaning towards that, you're going to need to teach how it works. So that, you know, you're not going to expect the girl to just get on the system and understand that sometimes elephant means elephant, and sometimes it means gray, and sometimes it means big. And then we have what I call the 3 Ps of alternative communication: patience, persistence, and problem solving. And that goes both for the person using the device and the communication partner. Patience, perseverance is not what I meant. I must have been very tired. Patience, persistence, and problem solving. So the ability to wait and to give yourself time to compose your message. The ability to sort of persevere even when the message isn't getting through. And then the ability to solve problems, to find a way to say what you need to say, even if everything isn't right where you need it to be. Okay, so what does the research say? And the research tends to be about 3 years behind the device. So there's not a lot of eye tracking AAC research. So this is just general AAC. So if you want someone to use AAC, it needs to be engaging. It needs to be something they want to do. It needs to be used for multiple purposes. So I worked with a student who went to a school and nobody in the school understood AAC, but she took horticulture. And the horticulture teacher thought that it was cool. So the horticulture teacher had the student using the AAC device in horticulture. Do you think that student became a good AAC user? Only in horticulture. You know, she wasn't able to say, I have a stomach ache. She could tell you, I need more dirt to fill this pot. But she wasn't able to say, you know, I'd like a hug. Or, you know, my AFO is pinching me. Another thing that's helpful is to use color coding. And I could go over the color coding, but I won't. But there are 2 main types, Fitzgerald Key and Goossens, and if you get to a point where that's something you want to know about, you can look it up. Also, locations or markers of specific and consistent placement, and consistent is, sorry, I'm going to talk without looking because I know what I want to say. If you have a way to pinpoint to the student where the important messages are, and you make sure that symbols are always in the same place, then they're going to be able to access their device with more ease, and they're going to want to do it more. So in this page set, and like I said, this is designed for Kelly, so you're not always going to find your jacket, or, you know, the same setup, but Kelly always has yes and no in these 2 places. She always has, this is the main page, so it's a little different, but she always has the go back button in this corner. So that's how she navigates between pages. And then you'll see some pages have a lot of messages. Her feelings page has the most, because that's what she likes to talk about the most. And even in those situations, we still have yes and no here, we still have go back here, but we've added ask me a yes, no question. What I want to say is not here. And then usually right above here, we have that's not what I meant, only she doesn't usually misfire on the feelings page, so we don't have that here. And then when she started with the Toby, this page had 12 symbols. And so we've grown to this over time. And that's really how it should work. There should be the ability to take pages that are working really well and grow them, and then pages that are maybe not working so well, or not favorite pages, and have a lot less. Okay, so we don't get a lot of questions. So we have that much more limited because it's not a page that she knows very well. Another thing is it's called aided language stimulation, but it's basically modeling. It's basically us using communication the same way we expect the girls to. So if I wanted to tell somebody how I was feeling, and they were using this board, I would actually use it myself. I would say, I want to tell you how I'm feeling. I feel happy today. How about you tell me how you're feeling? And try to use the system as much as they do. So if I were teaching a cooking lesson and we were using this board, I would do the same thing. I'd say, all right, guys, I wonder what it is we need to do next. We need to stir next. Who would like a turn to stir? And you'll see that time I didn't even ask any of the kids to use the device. It was just about me showing how it can be used. All right, and the more you do that, the more language in, language out is basically what it comes down to. The more language you put in, the more language you'll get out. And the next thing is core words versus topic boards. So when I first started teaching, the big thing was engineered environments, right? So we would make all of these topic boards. So you had a communication board that was just for bath time. And you had a communication board that was just for playing in the dollhouse. And they all had almost all nouns. And you only use them in that one setting. But what it turns out is that your communication is a lot better if you have sort of the most common 100 to 1,000 words available. Now the catch with that is that if you only use core words, it can take a really long time to say what you want to say. So for example, Kelly has the ability to go into core words when she'd like to say something. She's not great at this page set. She understands it, but it's a lot of work, and finding the messages is hard, and so she doesn't use it very much. I like to make her use it to write emails because that's an activity she really likes to do, so I will have her use it for that. But to make a sentence, like if you wanted to say, you know, I want my mom, you would have to say, I. And then you'd have to think about, oh, where's want? I don't know, I don't use this a lot. It's not there, so let me try if I go to categories and I go to, who's ready to give up? You know? So the first sentence Kelly ever made on here was, my brother likes sandals, right? And it took almost 20 minutes to say that. And it was not something she could say on any other board. It was the first thing she said in this section, not the first thing she said ever on the device. But it took a long time. She had to say, she had to go to people, she had to go to family, she had to find brother, and then she had to tell us which brother, and then she had to go back to the beginning, you know, and all these mishits because nothing really makes sense, and then she had to figure out how do I say like, and she had to find like, and then the words don't automatically change tense or anything, so there was no likes. And then to say sandals, you know, she had to go to things, and then she had to find clothing, and then she had to find sandals. And that takes a lot longer when you also have to hold your eyes on each message for a certain amount of time. So that's sort of the bonus of core words is she never ever would have been able to tell us that if she didn't have core words. The problem with it is the amount of effort it takes, the cognitive load is really high, and the amount of time it takes. Kelly has the video is going to show you. Kelly helped write a presentation she gave to future music therapists, and one of the things she said was basically, I don't like using core words because it takes too long. So there you have some of the big what the research says about AAC, and I know we're pretty much supposed to be wrapping up, aren't we? No, I'm fine, good. Okay, so. So let's talk about low-tech eye pointing and high-tech eye pointing. And what I want to ask so I can sort of move a little quickly is I'm guessing you all want to hear more about high-tech. Am I right? Yes, there's consensus. So I'm going to breeze through this low-tech stuff, like fast, no detail, and then I'll spend more time on the high-tech, okay? So basically, low-tech can be an entryway into intentional communication. It's where you start. It's a backup method for if the user's too ill, and a backup to high-tech systems. And the one thing you can count on with a high-tech device is it will break down. Guaranteed. So you need to always have a backup way to communicate because it's really not okay to have no way to talk for 2 weeks. All right, high-tech tracking, eye gazing is great for when other direct selection methods don't work, when scanning or encoding is too hard or too much effort, and when severe apraxia requires that there's a very limited amount of movement to communicate. All right, this is like the big tip section. So I already said language in, language out. The way you teach any skill is instruct, model, practice, praise. Which one do you think we all skip when teaching communication? Modeling. We all skip modeling. How's that? Can you see it now?
It's about a 10-second delay.
Yeah, that's good right there. That's good right there. All right, I got it. I'll just try to hold it here while I talk. Okay, so the next thing is instruct, model, practice, praise, and when I was just saying, what do you think we miss? Usually model. Usually we miss the modeling part, and we really need to use our devices with the girls. Okay, it needs to be, everybody uses it, and that's the best way to find out what's, oh, it's good. Good, because if I had to hold it higher, that wasn't going to happen. So we need to use it with the girls. And that the best way to find out what messages are missing are to try to have a conversation with it yourself. Sit down and use it yourself and try to have a conversation. You're going to find out pretty quickly what you forgot to put in there. One of the activities I like to do with my teacher aides is I give them all a device, and then they all have to converse with each other for our whole staff meeting using the device. How long do you think they get before they speak? And they always try to find the alphabet board and spell too. And I have to say, you know, we're not gonna be spelling anything. You know, I could put it on the mount, but I can't just put it on the box because it doesn't stand up.
Oh, okay.
So, and the mount is angled, so I'll just hold it. I'm good. It's fine. It's fine. I actually do this when I do evals on girls. I have to hold it very still. Okay, so then close enough is good enough. So one day we came into school and Kelly said makeup. I was like, okay, makeup. What about makeup? All right. And then she started with, it looks bad. Okay, what looks bad? And then some time went by, and then we heard makeup. Makeup looks bad? Well, I'm not wearing any makeup. What I didn't know was she wasn't looking at me. She was looking behind me. And then about maybe 35 seconds later, blue. And then the nurse starts laughing so hard. And I turn around, and she's got blue eyeshadow like that. And she had apparently been teaching her friend's daughter how to apply makeup that morning. And was trying to sort of the, don't lesson. And had left it on for the day, and Kelly had picked right up on it. But all communication is contextual, and close enough is good enough come together in that story. Because close enough is good enough, like that message, it looks bad, makeup, blue. Like if I walked up to you on the street, you wouldn't know what that meant. It was contextual. And close enough is good enough is she didn't say your makeup looks bad. It's really just too much blue eyeshadow. She didn't put together a full grammatical sentence, but that's fine. She got her point across. The next thing is we need more than nouns. I don't know how often I go into a classroom and all I see are nouns. Nouns, nouns, nouns. There's no verbs. There's no prepositions. It's just all nouns. The next is, and this is for girls who maybe you've been told are too low to try any of this. We teach intent by assuming intent. Okay, so you might hear the child, they're pre-intentional, they don't understand. Well, if you think about a baby, right, and they have those, they're some keys or something that they're playing with, and they drop it on the floor. Well, the first time, it was pre-intentional. They didn't intend to drop it. Somebody picked them up, somebody said something, maybe the next time was not intentional. You know what, by the 8th time, that was intentional. So we teach intent by assuming intent, by acting like it was a meant. Okay, so if somebody says in the middle of class or at home at dinner something that's completely irrelevant, you go ahead and assume that that was what they meant to say, and you make that into a conversation to sort of both teach that I'm going to listen to you and to teach that when you say something, I'm going to assume it means something. I'm not going to just ignore you. The next thing, and this is the big one, is we teach, we don't test. It's not teaching to say, find the apple. Find the button that says, I like it. There must be good comments going on over there. How many times do we say, and I see this all the time, okay, here's what we're going to do. I want you to tell me what month it is. Okay, first of all, if they're past the age of maybe 9 and they don't know what month it is, really, is that the skill you want to be working on? Like, that's your first choice. Second of all, chances are, for the past however many days have gone by in the month, you've asked the same question. You know, you're just testing if they can find the symbol for April. That's not communication, that's a quiz. You know, so you really need to think about that life needs to be more than a multiple choice quiz. You know, it can't always be that every minute is asking questions. One of the things that Kelly will say, I hope I can find this message. I know she can find this message.
I have something to say.
Where is it?
Back. Something's wrong.
She has a message that says, I get sick and tired of everybody just asking me questions. Oh, well, that's not it. But,
I really hate it when people tell me what to say or just ask questions all the time. So how about if you just talk with me?
Okay, we get that a lot. We also get this one a lot.
Please don't talk about me like I am not here.
Okay, and those are important messages to be able to say. The next thing is yes and no. How much time do we spend teaching yes and no? I mean, it's just out of control. And then what happens if that's all you do is that's all we're going to say. We're not going to move past it. Everything's going to be a yes or no question. Do you want a drink? Yes or no? Do you want apple juice? Yes or no? No? All right, do you want, and you could go on for 100 years playing 20 questions and it's still not communicating. It's still just,
I really hate it when people tell me what to say or just ask questions all the time. So how about if you just talk with me?
all right, so exploring to learn and learn to explore. Sometimes we just need to talk to ourselves. And so it's really okay and it's a great idea to let somebody just hang out with their device for a while and just talk to themselves. Activate messages, find out what's where, you know, the same way we all do in our heads all the time. And probably out loud all the time too. And just have a conversation with yourself. Like, that's a cool thing to do. And if you come near somebody and they're doing that, you can always say, oh, are you just talking to yourself? And if they say yes, all right, you know, it's fine. I'm going to put this down. I promise not to activate it. Put it back up again. Let's see, where was I? You have to expect communication to get communication. There's something we call the food fairy in our classroom, and that's the idea that food magically swooshes down from the air on a plate in front of you, and you eat it. It didn't come from anywhere. It wasn't prepared by anyone. It's just magic. And that's the idea that we need to think about is, at the very least, if our students can't maybe prepare their own meal, or if they can't get dressed on their own, they at least need to be communicating about it. You know, they at least need to be saying, you know, we love sabotage, so they at least need to be saying, you know, you get them dressed and you only put one sock on, you walk away. That's a great communication opportunity to say, you know, you forgot my sock, or what's wrong with you today, or you know, come on already, where's my foot's cold. So one of the ways that we can really get communication is to expect communication. The next thing is, people will always say that we need to limit distractions. How many of you have heard that? Limited distractions. The problem with that is that's not the real world. Okay, if all we ever do is communicate with our devices in a room with limited distractions where it's quiet and there's nothing hanging on the wall and nothing moving around, then what good is that when you go to the mall? You know, what good is that at the doctor's office when you really need to say what's hurting you? So start with limited distractions and then increase the amount of distractions, you know. We had a conversation in the hallway today, and there was a lot of distraction, and it took a long time to have a conversation that would have been faster in the classroom. But the whole idea was that there was a lot of distraction. So you could learn to have a conversation even when there's stuff going on. And the other point for that in our school is that I really want people to see my kids communicating in the building. So if we go in the hallway to have a chat, people get to see us talking with our devices. The next thing is to build in time. I would hear it. But we've built in time. We have skills group in the classroom every day, and everybody works on whatever skills are in their IEP. A lot of the kids have a skills group once a week, where for 45 minutes, the skill they're working on is just talking. And it's the job of whatever staff is with them for that time to just sit with them and have a conversation. You know, you're not working on, there's WH questions, you're not taking data, you're just practicing communicating. All right, and then the next big thing, the biggest thing, is to wait. You have to wait. I was in a classroom and with a student who was using scanning, and the teacher would ask a question, and if the student didn't answer in 15 seconds, she would activate the switch for her. 15 seconds is a long time for a lot of us, but for a lot of our students, it takes 2 minutes to process the words and then make their body work. So we really need to think about figuring out what the average processing time is. Some other subject, English. But every activity ends up being about communication. So if we're doing a science experiment, and we do them frequently, we're not, it'd be nice if they learned what gravity was, like that'd be super, but I care about that a lot less than them knowing that the word for something that goes that way is down, and the word for something that goes that way is up, and that if we're doing an experiment, that they can tell me, go to start the ball running down the ramp is one we did recently. They can communicate go and the ball will run down the ramp, and they can communicate, it went far or it went near. So every lesson turns into a communication lesson.
Can you tell that by looking at the IEP goals, or no, not necessarily?
It depends on the teacher. I think my students, you can tell by looking. I don't have a lot of academic goals.
Yeah.
Or my goals are things like so-and-so will listen to a text and will answer 3 out of 5 questions correctly. Which, it's an academic goal, but what is that really about? That's really about making a sentence. It's about understanding language and giving me language back. It's about the ability to communicate a message in a set amount of time. So it's an academic goal, but it's a communication goal. And I mean, I could teach all day, and somebody said this to me recently, they don't need the devices. I can teach all day just using yes, no. And while that's true, I could. Why would I? That's not serving anybody. If you're a speech therapist, right?
No.
No? You're a parent. And what do you do for a living?
I'm an OT.
You're an OT, okay. So if you know all about tremor, right, but nobody taught you how to communicate about tremor, what good does it do you to know about tremor? You know what I mean? It doesn't do you any good. I evaluated a kid for tremor last week, but if I walked up to you and said, listen, I evaluated this kid, myoclonic dystonia, and he can play his Game Boy if he's like this. Can you tell me why that happens in the body with the tremor? Oh, by the way, you can't talk or write. What good was your college education now? So that's why communication is really the focus of every lesson. Because without communication, why know the other stuff? And I think the state, really, the way they put forward MCAS is they need to exposure to academics, and they need to learn academics, and I don't disagree with that. I think it's a human rights issue. They have a human right, my students have a human right to learn all of this other stuff, but they also have a human right to be able to communicate and say they've learned it, and say it's boring, and say I hate it, or say, Kelly, if I let her, she would talk about Jane Goodall all day long. And okay, like that, and that's what I like. That's what I want to know. I want to know that that when we're in the middle of a social studies lesson, and I'm not a big fan, and she would rather be doing science, and she says to me, hypothesis. I said, oh, hypothesis, huh? We're doing social studies, And then then it's more important to me than she knows about Jane Goodall is that she's able to tell me that I want to do an experiment. I want to be doing science. Please don't talk to me anymore about this month's unit is jobs. Please don't talk to me anymore about jobs. I'm over it. Let's go back to our unit on force and gravity and motion. So I think I over-answered your question.
No, it's just kind of convinced, to get this all reflected in what the school is doing.
That's the hard part. And that's one of the reasons why I do workshops for families for free, is because if you guys have this knowledge and you can go into the IEP meeting and say, I see you have this goal that says he'll be able to, or she'll be able to, saying he, I'm sorry, she'll be able to identify 5 picture symbols related to a science unit, you need to be able to say, well, that's great, but could we make it, we'll be able to use 5 core words in a science lesson? because that's something that could be, because it can go across activities, you know. So if we wanted them to know, 5 core words: up, down, in, out, and go, that's probably a lot more important than gravity, force, motion. I mean, not that those other things aren't important, just that,
We're not there yet.
priorities.